I was always drawn by these structures or forms, or more generally objects, that, whether man-made or found in nature, seem to have something elusive about them, something that constantly evades human grasping. I like to think that these objects bring forward an alien quality. This idea forms the background for this work. Similar to these objects, the learning process of a neural network, albeit designed by humans, maintains a cryptic element, which at times can be even unpredictable. Presenting the learning process of a neural network as an alien symbiotic struggle is what this piece is all about.
Hello, this is Tywi John Howell Roberts, and I'd like to present to you Blood which we wrote in collaboration with Samantha Weaver, who provided the text in 5 sections, 2 of which are featured in this piece. Beforehand, I'd just like to thank the 4 sopranos who offered their services heroically for this work as well, who are Vanessa Gui, Zara Carolyn, Sean Davis, and Rhiannon Ashley. You'll hear in this piece many uses of a sort of garbled form of Welsh created by sample RNN. To English ears, this may just sound like Welsh, but I assure you there is no hidden meaning inside the verbiage which you'll encounter. And as such, this piece has also given us an interesting opportunity to explore the sonic qualities of Welsh. And finally, it's also been a fine opportunity for us to tie together older heritage with current contemporary technology and techniques, and hopefully find a harmony between them where they can complement each other instead of being in tension. So that's enough from me, and I hope you enjoy the work. Thank you. came was new, which just close closely discussed as if that what is the
You May Own Us, But We Are Going to Inform on You is a piece written in collaboration with Sarah Watts and uses machine learning code PRiSM sample RNN with the aid of Christopher Meelan. Initially conceived of to offer a between point in the voices of composer and performer, this piece uses machine learning to fuse improvisation and composition, to fuse the found behaviours in two distinct voices, and to offer a glimpse into an artificial identity, as heard and generated by an algorithm. The contributions of our artificial collaborator are weaved into the composed track. Given the same space as a human collaborator, the artificial voice remains largely unedited or tampered with, and becomes an equal voice in the collaboration. The exhilaration and discomfort of likening a robot to a human bleeds into the narrative of the final piece. Ruminations on the implications of artificial intelligence in society, on social scores, normative patterns and invisible bodies, on Google's deep dream images and dogs' heads as meatballs, and on reality and corporate control combined, twisted and splurged into uncomfortable truths. The title is a quote from Hito Steyerl's chapter A Sea of Data in her book Duty-Free Art in the Age of Planetary Civil War.
Hello everyone, my name is Chris Rhodes. I'm a Manchester-based composer of electroacoustic music and also a final year PhD candidate in music composition at the University of Manchester. The piece you'll be hearing tonight is called Semiconductor, and it's a piece exploring how we can use biometric sensors and biometric information to command digital musical instruments and how we can create interesting musical outcomes via that interaction. I hope you enjoy the piece and I look forward to speaking to some of you after the concert. Thanks for listening.
everyone, and welcome to Unsupervised, the first event of Future Music 3, this year's Future Music Festival at the RNCM. So a little bit about the group. Unsupervised is brought to you by the Machine Learning for Music Working Group, which is a new group and a collaboration between PRiSM, the Centre for Practice and Research in Science and Music, and the NOVARS Research Centre at the University of Manchester. So first of all, I'd really like to congratulate all of our participating artists on a fantastic first stream. So congratulations, Tassos, Tywi, Ellen and Chris. What a fantastic set of pieces, truly impressive and so varied. And also I'd like to congratulate in advance Zakiya, Rob, Vicky and Hongshuo, whose work will be premiering in the next stream at 7. So thank you all for being here with me this evening as part of this panel Q&A. Yeah, if you're watching and you want to send us a question, then you can do so via email. If you email PRiSM Centre Manager Sam Duffy, whose email address is sam.duffy@rncm.ac.uk, or you can contact us via Twitter at RNCMPrism using the hashtag PRiSM Future Music. So maybe let's start by introducing ourselves. My name's Sam Salem. I'm PRiSM Lecturer of Composition. I'm a composer who works predominantly with live performance, instruments, performative electronics, objects, and fixed audio visual media. But I have a particular interest in generative and procedural animation and composition, and latterly in machine learning, which is an extension of that. And I guess you could say that I was the co-facilitator of this group, along with my friend and colleague, Ricardo Climent. So let's maybe hear from everyone. I'll call you out. And let's start with Ricardo.
Thank you, Sam. Just to say, reiterate the immense pleasure being on the premiere of these fantastic works. It's been 1 year almost working in the darkness, very quietly, and I think the results have been fantastic. I'm very proud of the group. And I think also very proud of the collaboration with the Royal Northern College, with PRiSM. We've been associated for many years, but you know, in this particular level, I think we've always been a little bit detached, and I think for me it's a personal achievement to close the hands together and open the future for this fantastic unsupervised group. I'm Professor of Interactive Music at the University of Manchester. My work is mostly in interactive music, interactive media. I work with game engines. I'm particularly interested in the possibilities of using machine learning in immersive environments, using gaming, using natural languages to, forecast things that probably humans can't understand but say. And I'm looking forward to see what the group has to say in the next generation of students, collaborators, because remember, this is not just about the universities. We also have contributors from outside academia, and we are very much looking forward to row in this direction in the future. So if anyone is interested for next year's activities in joining us, it will be a possibility as well to open the discussion outside academia.
Great, thank you, Ricardo. So let's go to our first cohort of the Machine Learning for Music Working Group. It'd be great if you could introduce yourselves and also introduce the piece that we've either just heard or are about to hear in the next stream at 7. So let's do this in concert order. If we could start with you, Tassos, please.
Yes, hi everyone. First of all, I would really like to say that I'm very happy that this moment that we have all worked a lot for finally arrived. And I'm here and sharing my work and seeing all the beautiful works you have put together. It's absolutely amazing. So my name is Tassos Asonitis. I'm a first-year PhD student at NOVARS Research Centre at the University of Manchester. I'm doing a PhD with Ricardo. My focus is audiovisual composition and AI processes, and particularly I'm trying to use sonification and visualization techniques in order to explore the artistic potential and perhaps the technical side of some artificial intelligence processes. And this is what I have also tried to do with the project for this collaboration. For this particular piece, I worked with a neural network called Sample RNN, I believe as most people in this project. Sample RNN can be, among other things, can be trained on sound and generate sound in return. So I wanted to make a piece that deals with the learning process of this network. Philosophically speaking, I'm intrigued by the so-called black box of artificial intelligence. So this is a term used to refer to a part of the learning process of the neural network that is not transparent, that is not fully transparent to the human user. So I wanted to make a piece that presents what is going on within this black box through a fictional narrative. And in this case, this narrative tells the story of a symbiotic struggle between two organisms. On one hand, there's an ideal, an organic, a complete organism that represents the sounds I used and created to train the neural network. And on the other hand, we have a mechanical, discrete, incomplete organism that is represented by the sounds generated by the neural network in return. And it is the coexistence and conflict between the two that sets out the plot for the piece that I presented.
Thank you, Tassos.
Just don't forget, Tassos, that I'm not the only supervisor. Richard Mendinger, also the business school, is second supervisor, because he's really the machine learning expert. So same as Christopher Mellon, just running the sample RNN at the college has been a fantastic tool for all of us.
Thanks, Ricardo. Thanks, Tassos. So over to you, Tywi.
Thanks, Sam. And I'm Tywi, and I am currently entering the final, I'm in the final year of my PhD at the RNCM. I've been studying with Mauricio Pauli, Larry Goves, and Rodrigo Constanzo. And I have a background with the rock guitar, especially in Robert Fripp's kind of guitarcraft seminars. That's a big part of where I come from. And at some point, I also merged that with electroacoustic and electronica type composition. So sort of the holy grail for me is kind of finding the same quality of experience that I got out of guitar work in my electronic composition. So my PhD is kind of focused on hybrid groups that kind of aim to bring the two things together and explore them. And the PC from today's Blodau with, it's based on a Welsh myth from the Mabinogion about a woman who is created from flowers and then later turned into an owl as a punishment for infidelity through a series of tragic circumstances. And it was designed as an exploration of that myth, and together with the poet Samantha Weaver, who created all of the text, which served as the main inspiration for the work. And we've been talking about doing something like this for a long time, actually, because we both have roots in Wales, but yet we're not kind of full Welsh speakers. We're kind of hybrids, or kind of liminal beings ourselves, in that we have smatterings of Welsh and a love of it, but we're not fully embedded in the culture. And there's ideas about that which somehow resonated with working with AI for us as well, in the sense that you're teaching an AI something, it's learning a language of some sort, although it never necessarily becomes fluent in it, especially since a lot of these algorithms are works in progress that are still at an early stage. And I'll thank Tassos for filling everyone in already on what sample RNN is. I won't go through that explanation again. But I made use of sample RNN for this piece, taking a library of sounds that I could find of owls and of natural sounds, as well as myself speaking Welsh and reading Welsh text, and some samples of the sopranos that you heard as well, and basically just kind of wanted to see what the process would throw out by giving it that big data set of collective sounds. So that was one angle that incorporated the AI, and then also the visuals you saw were generated by the Big Sleep algorithm, which was created by a kind of an online open source engineer called Advadnoun, or adverb. I'm not sure exactly which name he goes by, but he's created an amazing algorithm which all you need to do is type in a sentence, describe something, and the algorithm will attempt to generate that image for you. And it also generates it in stages, so you can see it slowly emerge from a weird primordial first attempt, and then that's what generated the animation that you saw through there. So I spent several weeks just typing in as many sentences as I could, all inspired by the Mabinogion and by Sam's poetry, which gave some fantastic, very suggestive words to go by. Because the Mabinogion, a lot of it is about transformation of things into other things. So these algorithms serve that purpose very well. That's probably enough for me for now. We can talk more if anyone has questions.
Thanks, Tywi. That's great. Over to you, Ellen.
Hi, I'm Ellen Sargen, and you just heard You May Own Us, but we are going to inform on you with Sarah Watts on the contrabass clarinet. So the piece, I mean, I'm primarily interested in my composition in forms of collaboration or forms of collaborative music making. And in my PhD, I focus a lot on working with the performer to find kind of common behaviours in what they do or what I do as a composer as well. And often in work I do, that's kind of a very subjective process, and it's about talking to each other and finding that out in this way. But in this piece, we wanted to use the opportunity for the algorithm to be an kind of objective observer of those facets of our kind of musical identities. So we fed it recordings of Sarah improvising, and we fed it recordings of my compositions, and then it generated all this material, and it really did pick out things that we do a lot. So that was really great. And then we threaded it back in and positioned it as a performer in a way as well, and didn't tamper too much with it because of that position we gave it. So yeah, that's the piece in a nutshell, really.
Thanks, Ellen. That's great. Over to Chris.
Hello everyone, my name is Chris Rhodes. I'm a final year PhD candidate at the University of Manchester. The PhD lies between NOVARS Research Centre, supervised by Ricardo, but also Alliance Manchester Business School with Richard Ulmendinger, who Ricardo mentioned earlier. So it's a weird mix between music composition meets data science, but I find that makes it interesting. I didn't initially, but now I can really get to grips with it. It's a journey. So the piece tonight you saw Semiconductor. It's about how you can use biometric information from wearable sensors and how you can create interesting interactions within different sort of modes. So in the first half, or in the first movement I should say, it's in virtual reality. And I was trying to come to grips with how I could use biometric information from natural gestures that we may make as performers and interact with certain objects that could create music that don't traditionally create music. So the journey of the piece is you sort of put objects into a musical atom, then you sort of excite the atom, that creates music interactively through gesture. And then the atom sort of excites too much and fragments. And that leads you into the second half of the piece, the second movement, which is aimed for a performer to sit in front of the piece, manipulate a sort of digital abstract violin. What was interesting for me in that section is how can I not emulate how a violin would sound in the real world? So I thought that might be a tad boring. So I thought, how could I add interesting timbres and interesting abstract elements to how a violin might sound if it was really imagined in some way. Those interactions are only possible through the biometric information from the wearable sensors you may have seen me wear, called the Myo armbands, and machine learning to make that complex biometric information from the sensors actually usable, which is the core point, I think. I think that's in a nutshell, really. I'm happy to talk about it more later if you have a question about it. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. That was great. So that was everyone from stream number 1. Now let's move on to participating artists from stream number 2, which is beginning at 7. I'm going to keep plugging this for the next 45 minutes or so. But to go again in order, if we could start with Zakiya, please.
Hi, I'm Zakiya Leeming. I'm doing my PhD at the RNCM, and my work looks at how composition can be informed by processes or patterns from science or technology. And I've been working with the clarinetists in this piece, Laurel and Grace, on a cycle of pieces that's trying to see how far we can push the notion of hybridity and really integrate the human and the machine and blur the distinction. So the material for the piece has undergone several different processes prior to it being going through a machine learning process. And so by the time it's got to this, it's already integrated lots of different technologies into it. And the really interesting thing, I think, about a machine learning process for this is that we can train it on things that we've done. We can train it on all of our past explorations and find out what happens to it when you put it through that process. So in this piece, what I've done is I've collected all of the stages of these explorations, raw audio that's been manipulated by sound design, or even being recorded via Zoom and different distortive technologies, and then also put that alongside all of the captured data at every point, and then also there's the machine learning generated material in its pure form, and then also it has been constructed into loops. I created loops for this piece that I then gave to the performers to learn and interpret as acoustic material. So what you hear in the piece is the performers playing an acoustic version of what they have learnt from the machine learning that has learnt from them. So that's the basis of the piece.
Great, thank you very much, Zakiya. Over to you, Rob.
Hi, I'm Rob Laidlow. My piece that you're going to hear is called Rose Green. So I've used machine learning in a few pieces before as part of my PhD at the RNCM, but they've all been mostly for live performers. Well, they've all involved live performers, although sometimes the machine learning has been part of an electronics track. So for this piece, I wanted to create something that was wholly electronic, which is something slightly outside of what I normally do. And also what I was interested in was I read an article about some of the high environmental or carbon costs of some of the really big models used by advertising companies, or like Twitter, that kind of thing. These really big, or text generators, in fact, as well. Really big carbon costs, and often these models are kind of trained once for one purpose, and then they'll train another one in the future to do something else. And I was kind of thinking about how it would be possible to instead repurpose algorithms to kind of find them and use them in your work, and not have to train a new model for every project. So that's what I aim to do with Rose Green. There's this element of finding other people's models and repurposing them towards this piece. And what I found was that a lot of the models that you can just use online for free, they don't need to train or anything like that, often have quite a sort of nostalgic tinge to them. They're often evoking things from the past. And I thought this was a really interesting dialogue between that and the idea of environmental costs impacting on our future. There's kind of a future past trading going on there, which I thought was pretty interesting. So that's my piece, Rose Green. I hope you enjoy listening to it later.
Thanks a lot, Rob. Vicky.
Hi, good evening everyone. I'm Vicky Clarke. I'm a sound artist from Manchester, UK. Yes, I'm not doing a PhD. I'm actually a DIY musician in Manchester, and I'm guest artist in residence with NOVARS, and it's really exciting to be part of Unsupervised. It's been a really good kind of collective endeavour over the past year to get to this point. So my work explores our relationship to sound material, and I work with sound sculpture and DIY electronics, and I've been interested in working with machine learning for quite a while. So the residency is kind of exploring musique concrète and machine learning, so taking the idea of musique concrète as the kind of original sampling medium and kind of colliding that with sample RNN, which is completely about tiny samples and generating new audio. So I'm interested in this idea of the sound object, working with an atom of authentic audio matter without context, and what happens to that when it's processed by a neural network. What are these new sound materials that can be generated through this process? So my first piece, my first experiment with machine learning is called Aura Machine. And because I like to show the process of technology and how things work, I wanted to take the listener on a journey through, starting with the training data, through training the model to the output generated AI, so people can almost compare and contrast what was happening to that sound material. So the piece starts off, the first 5 minutes is my kind of concrete training data set, which is the sounds of mill spaces in Manchester and sound sculptures and different materials of noise and electronics. And then the final 5 minutes is the generated AI. And the idea behind the term aura is actually from an essay by Walter Benjamin, The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, which kind of talks about the idea that the aura of an object or an artwork is kind of essential to its time and history and its authentic place. So I wanted to see how a machine would deal with a sound object of authentic matter, and can it generate a new aura, or will it be a pale imitation of that input data? So I'll let you decide. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the piece later.
Thanks a lot, Vicky. That was great. And lastly, Hongshuo.
Hi everyone, good evening. I'm Hongshuo Fan. I'm currently PhD candidate at the University of Manchester, NOVARS Research Center with Ricardo Climent and Richard Volley. I feel myself...
Also, I think it's a bit quiet.
It's quiet?
Can you put the microphone up, please?
How about right now?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. I'm a cross-discipline artist and researcher with a strong music background, I say myself, and focus on how to fusion traditional culture and cutting-edge technology. So, and during my PhD research, machine learning, especially deep learning, has become an increasingly important method to unveil some new form of creativity and expression I never seen before. So this piece I say last piece of this second half of our concert is called Metamorphosis. It's a real-time interactive audiovisual composition for one human performer and two artificial intellectual performers. So this piece also inspired me doing for last year because of lockdown, like we have to do the Zoom meeting every day. So you will say some like Zoom meeting concert style at first, and later we will transform to another space. So the artificial intelligence performer is a pre-trained non-short-term memory-based recurrent neural network, which could generate music information based on specific rule and condition, for example, like rhythm and density and duration, such that and in real time. So I want to use this old Asian instrument at first to introduce how people play this instrument and inspire by others. Can we inspire the AI performers, or the AI performer can inspire another AI? And also we can, from that, we can inspire ourselves. So the idea behind this piece is how we can using AI technology, not just mimic ourselves or mimic human. Can we use AI or deep learning, machine learning technology to enhance our own creativity? Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Hongshuo. That was great. So yeah, it's been quite a journey, as a couple of you alluded to. I mean, we started talking in September, and it's been really, really great to have this contact with you over this period. It's kept me somewhat sane, I think. It's been wonderful to see your projects develop. As the first cohort to come through the working group, the first of many, I hope, I have a question or two for you. And we have some questions from viewers, some about sample RNN that we can get to in a few moments. And now that I think about it, I'm deeply disappointed that it didn't occur to me to create a bot to generate questions. Like why didn't I think of that? That would have been next time. Okay, that's the next project. The next working group project's just going to be a question bot. But the question I had for you was really quite a general one. But I guess some of you are quite a very seasoned machine learning / AI researchers, and it's a core part of your practice. And some of you are really, this is your first encounter with machine learning and artificial intelligence. So it's a really interesting group from that perspective and from many others. So I guess my question is for all of you to describe, if you can, what you think the potential of this technology is and what the friction is. Like, where's the potential and where's the friction? And so that's sort of part one. And part two is, what does the emergence of this technology tell us about the world today? Does it tell us anything that's interesting? Because, yeah, it's an open question and a somewhat vague one, but maybe it will get the ball rolling. So I won't call on anyone in particular. If you want to just, if you have a response, feel free to jump in. Musing.
I can chat. For me, there was a lot of friction. I didn't expect there to be, but once I got my samples back, and once I started, I was reading at the time that this amazing book by Hito Steyl, Art in the Age of Planetary Civil War, and I started to, the friction of it became more and more, because I started to become really slightly uncomfortable with my relationship with AI anyway in the world, and what it means for all of us going forward, just as citizens, global citizens. And I never resolved that tension in the piece, and I still haven't resolved how I feel about it now. But that, yeah, became quite a big thing for me. And I think because I'd also kind of posited it as this human collaborator that enhanced those kind of worries, like, yeah, what was I doing giving rights to a robot? And yeah, I started to consider the implications of that, because in some ways it's really worrying. And I won't, yeah, I guess, I mean, that would be I'd like to ask you all about that eventually later as well, but that's where I was on the friction of it. And that's all I'll say for now.
It's really interesting, because you felt that friction, and yet your piece was so respectful to the machine learning generated material. Like, it's really notable that you approached it as a collaborator, as if it was another performer in the space that has to have its space in the piece to be heard. It was really interesting, actually, and quite notable. But yeah, does anyone else have any view on the potential or the friction of this technology, and how that's represented in your work so far? Oh, Zach.
Yes. Yeah, I think my experience was maybe the opposite of that one. It felt like it felt to me quite pioneering, and obviously I'm not the first person ever to venture this ground, but it was pioneering for me in my practice, and it was actually very freeing for that reason, because I didn't know what to expect. I didn't have very many things to judge the process on, and as a composer, there's two things that are, there are two things for which there is nothing more exciting in the world. There are new sounds and new compositional processes, and this gave me both. So I was very happy exploring, all of those possibilities and finding out these really interesting ways that it can become a part of a practice that can bring performers and composers together in a way, in a way that maybe some other things can't. So I felt that was actually a really good way to connect to other people, and to have, actually, I really found a human element of it was quite a large part of that for me, because it was it was reflecting back to us, maybe something about us that I think Ellen mentioned in her talk about her piece as well. So I think for me it was definitely reassuring actually that this will have a place and a role in contemporary music, and I certainly don't. And any idea of threats or any infringement went away through that because it was so positive and additive for me. Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Zach. That's great. Vicky, please. I think you also
Yeah, I think for me, working, it just took me in a completely different direction, actually, working with these types of systems. And just in terms of collecting that training data set was a completely new process. So the idea that we had to collect kind of 90 minutes of single sound recordings was a huge actual task of labour. So it was probably the biggest sampling experiment that I've ever taken part in. And to kind of do that, you were kind of second guessing what the machine might want to extract in terms of features. So it kind of meant for me, I kind of made this like rule-based system of how I was collecting those sounds and how raw the material was, classifying those sounds and almost working like a machine to try and kind of second guess what the model might kind of detect or kind of blend together or generate new material. So for me, it was really interesting working process, and I've tried to kind of track that methodology. But then the other flip side to that was when I was in the listening zone. So when I received back that audio material, it felt really uncanny. So working with this kind of audio material that was from a completely different sound source to something that I'd ever heard before. So that really sort of posed to me new sort of compositional ways, or that I might work with this material, and really took me in a different creative direction. And I really tried to let the sounds that were coming out kind of guide the piece itself, try to keep it as raw as possible. And so yeah, I think it brought up lots of different methodologies and kind of rules or kind of new scenarios of how you might compose with these tools.
Great, thanks, Vicky. And that's something I can relate to as well, both your points actually, because I don't think it's that I'm jaded, but it's been a few years since something happened while I was making material that made me think, well, what do I do with this? Like, I don't know what to do with this stuff. It's sort of it's challenging me in a way that I'm my usual bag of tricks doesn't apply to this material. So it's kind of a workout and interesting from that perspective for sure for me also. But yeah, does anyone else have a view on this question, or shall we move on to one of the questions? Yeah, Tywi.
Yeah, cheers, Sam. I think for me, one point of friction was I didn't know what the output was going to look like at all. So there was a gamble sort of element to it, and I was sure of was I was creating quite a melodic, quite sweet sound world almost, and then when the material came back, I was a little bit nervous because I thought, oh, hang on, I'm not sure this will go together at all. So, but in the end, I think accepting that, maybe the way Ellen did as well, kind of trusting it and kind of letting it have its say, I think it served as a sort of creative inspiration then, because it did make sort of formal choices that I wouldn't have made. Most of the sounds that were in the piece that were generated by the AI, I didn't actually tinker with them that much. I kind of let them play out in a chunk as they came back, and a lot of them had a sort of structure, a form of their own that I wouldn't have chosen ever. So I suppose that ties into what the potential is. And just briefly touching on, you said, what does it mean that the technology has come now? I think maybe it's to do with sort of saturation, because I feel like now that we're all in a sea of artists and musicians and composers everywhere, and there's so much material that people have made already, it's impossible to keep up with it. So in a way, it feels kind of natural that one of the tools we've got now is something you can just point back at everything that exists and get it to generate things for us. Just a thought, I don't know how true it is.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Tywi. I was thinking the same thing, and in a way it's quite ironic, because as a result of so much content, we've invented ways to generate infinitely more content. That's really bizarre, isn't it? But interesting nonetheless. So if no one else has a view on that, maybe we'll take one of the questions from our audience, which is...
There's one from Gabriel Francisco Lemos with regard to sample RNN.
Please, yeah.
Should I read the question? Okay, so it says, Gabriel Francisco Lemos, regarding the sample RNN, how do you see the future of it regarding high quality sound generation? It is a great tool to generate neural synth, but so far it is still in its infancy, right? So I think this is connected to the quality of the samples we receive from Chris, and I think some composers here reacted to it in a different way. One of them was Vicky. He was working with lo-fi and returned lo-fi. He was interested in this lo-fi work, and some others thought that maybe the threshold of the kind of things they would approve within the compositional threshold, the high quality, low quality, have to be revisited. Because I don't think we can wait for the next generation of sample RNN algorithms. It's just that you have to deal with what you have. I think Sam can probably explain a little bit more about what is the state of the sample RNN algorithms that we are using. But to my mind, one of the things we've been discussing in the group, and I think it was a clear understanding that we agreed, was that we are facing yet another synthesis tool, kind of synthesis in inverted commas. And I actually, sort of thought that was a fair thing to say, but after thinking about it for a while, I realized that maybe we were wrong, that this is not yet another tool that we found in the past, granular synthesis, physical models as a synthesis tool, which is not. It was mostly something else. But I don't know exactly what it is. That's the problem. We don't know what we are facing. We know the times of it. We're going back to slow performance, pressing the enter button and waiting for 24 hours to get the results, as in the 90s. But to my mind, it has to do with so it's not that it's the wrong question, Gabriel. It's mostly to say that maybe this is not what we are after. What we are seeing here is that we're pushing the boundaries of what we've seen before, in a way. And for me, for example, Hongshuo's work is an example of that, because he's pushing this idea of the performance between humans. This is the one we understand. Then we started with human-computer interaction, humans and computer telling each other, what they think on a stage. But now we are seeing two computers talking to each other, like Internet of Things. And then we are seeing this on a stage. I mean, this is not just another tool. It's not just about sample RNN or any other neural network or method of machine learning synthesis. I think we're in front of something we don't really understand. And so it has become a bit of sort of philosophical. But that's my take on it. So maybe someone can tell more experience with the sample RNN algorithm. Chris would be the ideal person, but I guess Sam, I pass the hot potato on to you now.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, regarding the future of it, I think as Ricardo alluded to, sample RNN, which is the algorithm we've been using, that Chris Mellon, the research software engineer at PRiSM, he retooled it and modernized it a little bit and added some features. But essentially, it's a brute force algorithm, sample by sample, and there are a lot of samples in a sound, and the higher the quality of the data set and the higher quality of the training and generation, the more samples there are. So I think in terms of that style of neural synthesis, we'll see more compression of various kinds, so that we're not working on a sample by sample basis, but rather on a token by token basis, or something similar to that. But I do think it's in its infancy, and I think it's quite limited, and I think it doesn't quite work, but that's actually what I like about it. I think if when I first started using neural synthesis, maybe 2.5 years ago, I made a model based on some field recordings, and I fed maybe 3,000 or 4,000 field recordings into this process. So the question I had to ask myself was, if I have 4,000 field recordings, why run this process to generate another field recording? Like, I already have 4,000. Do I want 4,001 or 4,020? No, I'm not doing it to make more of what I already have. I want to see what this strange kind of little zone between working and broken is. And that kind of uncanny space. I think that's where we are with neural synthesis right now. And I think that's super interesting. And in the work that we've seen so far and the work that we will see in the next concert, I think that's really notable. And I find it quite intellectually engaging, philosophically engaging, but also just aesthetically beautiful. I like that kind of that area, that in-betweenness. So yeah, it is in its infancy. It'll get quicker, it'll get more accurate, it'll become perfect, and then maybe it won't be as interesting as it is right now, and we'll have people like us, like we, I was watching a video the other day of someone using an Atari and an Akai S1000 sampler to make drum and bass. We'll be like that artist. We'll be kind of using PRiSM sample RNN from 2019 or 2020 because it has like a certain aesthetic fingerprint that the newer technologies maybe don't have. But who knows? It's up for grabs, I think.
I remember when I was at Queen's, we had this Akai 1000, 3000, and we used to freeze it with a Metro 20 max to create this sort of frozen textures. It was amazing. So you cannot underestimate the power of all technology and low sample rate.
It's funny, slight tangent, but I actually have one of those samplers. I got from Belfast. I got it from a skip, Ricardo. When I was
did you? Probably the one I was using, yes. I think Tassos has something to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize on what Sam said, because I find it very, very interesting that, yes, eventually sample RNN and other neural networks that are working with time series data will get better and they will get more accurate. And I agree that we might end up realizing that they will get boring when that happens, because I think, and that might be an interesting and bit provocative question to wonder whether, at least all of us being here, we would actually compose something if we had a network that can very accurately spit out the material that we're giving it as input. I think we all worked in this creative gap between the two, and we exploited that in different ways. I know for sure that I was expecting something different to come out of the network, and working with Chris Mellon, where he sent me the samples and he made me understand a bit of the process, that completely changed my perspective on the piece and on the narrative that I ended up adopting. So I think it's precisely this distance between what we're giving to the system and what we're taking from it that we can host our creativity as artists.
Great, thanks, Tassos. I have another question from the public, and maybe we'll take this one, and then it would be great to hear your questions if you have questions for the group. So Matt Benetton asks, what are the main barriers composers face when trying to incorporate AI, and how could the wider community of machine learning researchers and practitioners assist with overcoming these? It's a big question as well.
I can give that one a go if you like, Sam. This is something I've thought about quite a lot recently. I don't, maybe everyone else disagrees or not, but I think the number one thing keeping composers or musicians back from using this technology is how difficult it looks like it is to use. And sometimes it really is that difficult. And sometimes you do need to have the correct hardware and you need to have the correct knowledge. But even when it's actually quite simple to use, it still looks very difficult. Someone who has no idea how to code, has never used Python in their life, even a Google Colab document is insurmountably difficult to use. And I just think that the number one thing that can be done is to work really hard on, you don't need like a fancy GUI user interface, but something that's really well documented, which is what Chris, the legendary Chris that we've mentioned, we've invoked his name 4 or 5 times now. His sample RNN notebook is very well documented, and it's very simple to use, it's very clear. And the other thing I think that people can do is to investigate what it is that composers do when they write a piece of music, because often a lot of resources will aim to do something in its entirety. Often they'll create an entire piece of music, and that doesn't leave any place for the composer to do anything if it works. And so composers aren't always very interested in that. But sometimes it might be, create a melody or whatever. And actually, how composers work sometimes it's like that, isn't it? But also sometimes it's more like you sort of get all these ingredients and you chuck them in the oven, and something comes out at the other end, and you can't really tell if it's machine learning or not. And I think being able to replace one of those ingredients in the compositional process would be really interesting, and you could get loads of different results actually from different composers. Yeah, good question, thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Rob. Great answer. Vicky, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Rob was saying there. I think I've definitely, coming into this process, I've used a lot of kind of visual creative tools for machine learning, but not really any for audio. So I think there's a definite kind of imbalance there at the moment, and it is about the interface and that user experience and how people come to this technology and how they meet that. And this kind of inaccessibility of code can be a barrier for people. And I think that's one of the things about machine learning and AI and audio, that it's kind of a challenge that we should all kind of share these kind of methodologies and how we work to bring other people into this sphere and make those interfaces a little bit more accessible. And so, wider composers can use this as a material, really. So I think that's a bit of, there's work to be done there, definitely. And I started out thinking, oh, I'll just learn Python and write my own algorithm, but it's really difficult. So we do need these Google Colab notebooks. We need different artists. We need this community across the world that are sharing these algorithms that they've made. But we need to have that understanding of how to share this knowledge and this technology. So I think that's kind of our mission.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, it's been super interesting for me, I'm sure for Ricardo, and hopefully for you guys as well, just to be in this process and to see how your ideas evolve and to see who's using what technology in what way as the pieces start to come together, because I've certainly learned a lot from just observing, and being part of that community. And it's funny how in a way, it's not a big thing to do, to get together and talk and show what you're doing, but it has such a huge impact and a huge potential for further impact. So I'm really, I'm really glad that we got to do this together, does anyone have a question for the group? I think we've got about 10 minutes or so. Zach, I see you have one.
Yeah, my question, it's come from a personal experience in this process, but it's in this new environment, composers are being thrust into the visual side, and I'm interested to know whether some of the other composers have had that experience before in their practice, and even if so, what was different about it this time, maybe, and what they feel about that shifting role, maybe, of being a composer, but also now being a visual content creator and editor.
Yes, it's a great question, Zach, and it was actually a question that I had as well. That was my second question. I'm really curious, like how everyone turned in audiovisual works, and is that just the streaming economy? When we go back to concerts, will everyone be making audiovisual works? Do you think you'll incorporate this into your practice, or is it just something that, as Zach says, has been like almost like a sign of the times that we're in and the way that we're presenting work? Any thoughts, anyone?
Yeah, it's a bit of a pandemic thing, isn't it? This the video. stuff, and it's not just composers. I think I've seen all kinds of freelance artists have suddenly been expected to be able to produce this kind of content, which we haven't done before, and it's quite. I think there's an interesting not really comparison, but musicians are often so cautious about what gets recorded and what gets uploaded and what remains on the internet. And as we know, there's often, we sign a contract with like an ensemble, it's sometimes like you can't use this in this way, or you can only use it for 30 days, or you can only use it in these situations. And I think with the advent of all these live streams, some of that's kind of gone out the window. So there's this idea that everyone's expected to do it, and it's also it seems very permanent, or things are now expected to be permanent or left online for other people to catch up later on than maybe was the case before. I don't, at least from my experience, things weren't always expected to be quite as permanent, actually. And it's tricky. We're not directors, we're not all of us, and it's a hard thing to do. I agree.
Yeah, please, Chris.
Yeah, I think for me it's really interesting because initially it was quite daunting personally to work with visual materials in art, coming from an acousmatic, straight composition background. But for me, I realised this was a good opportunity to develop my visual craft because, for example, I do a lot of work with biometrics, biometric information and gesture information to create new music and new musical instruments, and you can't really connect the two fully through sound alone, I don't think, in my use case. So using visuals actually really benefited the work in the sense that I think the relationship is more obvious when using visuals. So for me, I think it really brought that home personally through the work, and I had to navigate that over time to use visuals and develop the skill.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Chris. Anyone else have a thought about this one? For me, I sort of oh please, Hongshuo.
Yeah, I think I'm using the visual element before the pandemic stuff because I think I agree with Chris. Sometimes we want to express some really abstract thinking idea in our piece, but with the sound, it's not enough. We think about using visual elements can more efficiently give the audience the information we want to pass to them. So also can engage with the audience more efficient. I would say more efficient and more quickly. And if you go to the concert, mostly for me, if you have a visual element, I may pay more attention on the visual parts. That's the downtime for this kind of thing, I would say. But we audiovisual composer try to find the balance between how we can deal with this two kind of different material. Yeah.
Do you ever worry that people pay attention to the visual side to the detriment of the audio side, or not? I often think about this when I watch a piece. How much am I giving attention to the visuals versus the sound, and is that correct?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Sure.
Best to read Michel Chion's book on the audiovisual contract. Actually, I have a comment to make about the title of our group, this series of concerts, Unsupervised, because it's to do with the way we learned and the way machines learn. And I wonder if we think we can find some similarities, because most of the understanding is that we are different entities. This is clearly seen in Tasso's work. He assumes that machines think differently, therefore we cannot assume things. But in a way, unsupervised learning, which gives the title to this fantastic group, is just a matter of not labeling or categorizing the data sets. In a way, it's like letting composers do things on their own, right? Not having specific rules. It's like a very boring lone summer for children. Like, they come with these fantastic new things because they don't know what to do with their time. They don't have a particular 15-minute task to do in the sandpit. And I found this quite interesting because we assume that we are different. But somehow, reflecting on this the other day, in my compositional process, I have all this labeled time, where you collect the materials, you put them in folders, like a sort of very Western thinking about how we organized our lives, how we organize musical materials, how do we transform them. But then on the other hand, when we make this, we sort of throw everything to the bin, go to the studio and we let ourselves go into the music to make the final decisions. We don't supervise that decision making in our brain. So I think it's more to do with a labeled form of thinking, but I may be wrong. So I just wanted to know what's your opinion about these two forms of learning between humans and machines, and whether maybe we should next year expand the algorithms a little bit, just to go beyond sample RNN, or deep into it, of course, because it's what we started. Maybe look at other resources as well.
I just had a thought about that, which is that we have all used sort of the I guess the deep learning or the machine learning end of artificial intelligence, but I'd be kind of interested to see other branches perhaps that aren't always considered so viable in terms of producing a perfect result, which is something that we've already said we're not interested in. And yeah, there's been a big focus obviously on sample RNN, which is one thing, but I wonder how more genetic algorithms or reinforcement learning algorithms might be used in our work, or people like ours work. It's not something I see a lot of at the moment.
And in fact, your piece coming up is about this, isn't it? It's about trained different algorithms that were abandoned, and so diversity as well.
Yeah, a lot of those are reinforcement learning algorithms, actually. But a lot of those in particular are to do with video games, and there's a very clear goal, isn't there, in video games? And I suppose we would need to define a goal that was both interesting but not prescriptive to create something that might be surprising.
I think Nomi is saying that our time is almost up. He's come over and he's licking my hands, which means it's almost 7 o'clock, his dinner time. And maybe let's leave it there for today. Thank you all very much for all of your work over the year and for all of these fantastic pieces. It's really a pleasure to have spent this time with you, and hopefully we'll see you again next year in one form or another. I would just like to give a little plug. Again, we're starting at 7 with Zakiya Leeming's Sad Dog Eating, Rob Laidlow's Rhodes Green, Vicky Clarke's Aura Machine, and Hongshuo Fan's Metamorphosis. So please do stay online for that. And yeah, thank you for watching.
I've been working with Laurel and Grace since the beginning of 2020. We've been exploring the sonic possibilities of the clarinet and performer instrument-specific agencies through an iterative series of workshops and pieces. The model for this piece was trained on the dataset from all of our previous workshops. I layered the generated material and then created loops, treating these sections as if they were chunks for the performers to learn. Grace and Laurel reinterpreted these as acoustic material, thereby continuing an iterative process that could theoretically continue forever.
When I was thinking about what to do for my piece Rose Green, I sort of found myself fascinated by this trend of constantly training new machine learning models in our work rather than plumbing the depths of what we already have. And this is something that extends beyond art to major commercial uses of this technology, particularly as well. I came across some information on the large carbon footprint of training major language and advertising models and that kind of thing. And I felt that this is pretty difficult to justify, and as a result wanted to experiment with work that trained no models whatsoever. So instead I pick up discarded or abandoned machine learning models from the kind of curbside of the internet. I work with what I can find, and I was surprised to find that this included a huge number of models geared towards providing a kind of nostalgic kick, 8-bit audio, new Pokemon cards, beating old Mario games, that kind of thing. There's something strange to me about using a technology that has unknown and potentially disastrous consequences for our future to reanimate something of a nostalgic past.
Who's that Pokemon?
This Pokemon is called a Matran, a solar Matran, and it is the first Pokemon that can manipulate the climate. It is a fast, flying, poison, and steel-type Pokemon. It eats carbon dioxide produced by burning fossil fuels. This creature is known for its high tolerance to cold. A lot of people consider it to be a hoax. When the temperature rises, it burns in a blaze. This creature is also said to be a good friend of firefighters, and it will usually join them on their firefights. The carbon footprint of training a single big language model is equal to around 300,000 kg of carbon dioxide emissions. This is of the order of 125 round-trip flights between New York and Beijing, a quantification that 8 persons can visualize. It is also the equivalent of 60 years of an average human life. The compute used in various large ag training models has been doubling every 3.4 months since 2012. The vast majority of research prioritizes accuracy over efficiency. But something that is incomplete, inaccurate or broken can actually be rather beautiful.
Hi, I'm Vicky Clarke. I'm a sound artist from Manchester, UK. My work explores our relationship to technology through sonic materiality, and I work with sound sculpture, DIY electronics, and human-machine systems. I'm really pleased this year to be artist in residence with NOVARS, Centre for Innovation in Sound at the University of Manchester, where I'm exploring the collision of machine learning and music concrete. I'm really excited tonight to share with you my first experiments in neural synthesis with my piece, Aura Machine. This is presented as part of our new Machine Learning for Music group, Unsupervised with PRiSM. Aura Machine seeks to explore what happens to the sound objects when processed by a neural network. The piece is a tale of two states, human and machine, beginning with my concrete training data set of field recordings of mills, machinery and materials, and ending with purely AI-generated output. Will the AI produce new hybrid sound materials, or will the data compression result in a lo-fi imitation of the original? Ultimately, can a machine generate an aura?
Metamorphosis is a real-time interactive audiovisual composition for one human performer and two artificial intellectual performers. Three performers will start by playing the same virtual Asian Chinese percussion instrument, binqi. Then, by learning, imitating, have a confrontation and a cooperation with each other, the shape and the sound of this instrument will evolve gradually, as well as the performers themselves. And for me, I think AI or machine learning technology is not the self-sufficient generators. It's more like creation tools, allows to enhance our own creativity. Therefore, in this composition, I want to explore this possible direction to create an interaction and control of creative approach that aims to establish co-creative partnerships with these AI performers and create an immersive experience exploring the dramatic shift and the co-evolution between human and AI.
Thank you.